Yeah, please.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I just want to take this opportunity to thank the organizers for putting together what's been a really fun and interesting conference in these challenging times. And I get the pleasure to introduce one of them, Ambarish Kunwar from the Indian Institute of Technology. And I guess he doesn't need much of an introduction, so I'll just let him take it away.
All right, thank you very much, Jordan. Good afternoon, everyone. And today I'm going to talk about stochastic model of cargo positioning by a team of antagonistic motor proteins. And I have two short stories to tell you in the time which I have been given. My lab works in the area of biophysics and computational biology, and there are two things on which we work very heavily. One of them is motor proteins, and the other one is microtubule. So I'm not going to talk about our microtubule work today. I'm talking about mostly motor proteins today. So I have been working on motor proteins as well as microtubule for a long time, and all of us know that they are important. They are important for cell divisions. For example, this video of dividing cell where you can see that the chromosomes are being pulled apart into two daughter cells with the help of microtubules. This animation of growing axon, and again in this process microtubules which are crossing by motor proteins generate outward pushing forces for these axons to grow. And the third one is animation of intracellular transport. I don't know why it's not working, but one of the very important functions that these motor proteins carry out is the intracellular transport, and this is something which is very important for cell survival and cell functioning. So this is the animation of this is actually a live video of in vivo transport. And when you look at a cell with a microscope, what you'll see that you'll find different types of organelles. They move in different directions. One of the reasons is that they are not produced in the locations where they are required. And you can think of this entire cell like a city where microtubules act like long range highways, and these actin filaments which are in the peripheral region in most of the cell, they act like local roads. And on these microtubules we have two different types of motors, kinesin and dynein, which move. And on these actin filaments we have unconventional myosin motors which carry out the transportation. So now let me give you a brief introduction to the cargo transport and how people have been trying to model it. So if you look at the various types of physiological cargos, for example, mitochondria, endosomes, and many other types of cargos, they are generally not transported by a single motor protein. They are transported by a team of motor proteins. So it's possible that a cargo which is moving here and there inside a cell, it is being transported either by a team of same type of motor protein as shown it's here, let's say kinesin, or it can be also transported by a team of opposite polarity motor, kinesin and dynein, working on the same cargo at the same time. So this kind of team is called an antagonistic team of motor proteins. So one team of motors, let's say kinesin, will try to pull it in one direction, and the dynein on the other hand will try to pull the cargo in the other direction. And the theoretical and computational models which have been developed to understand cargo transport by a team of motor proteins can be broadly divided into two groups. One of them is called mean field model. The other one can be called stochastic model. But let me be very clear that all the models which have been developed, all of these models are stochastic. It is only the assumption of load sharing which is mean field or stochastic in these models. So if we talk about the mean field models of cargo transport, the assumption of load sharing is mean field in this model. For example, let's say if you have a cargo and there are 3 engaged motors, and if the cargo is feeling a opposing force of F, then all the 3 engaged motors will share this load equally. However, in the stochastic model, that is not the case, and all the engaged motors will experience different amount of force depending on their position on the cargo as well as on the microtubule. So the first mean field model of cargo transport, or mean field model of load sharing, was developed by Lipowski's group, and they had a very simple model. You have a cargo which is being driven cooperatively by a team of n identical motors. The force velocity relation for these motors was supposed to be was assumed to be linear, and the force dissociation relation for these motors was taken as an exponentially growing one with force. Now what one can do, one can write down the probability of finding this cargo in various states. For example, let's say a state n where it is attached to the microtubule by n number of bound motors, and then you in that particular state the cargo has a, let's say, velocity vn, it has a unbinding rate of epsilon n, and it has a rebinding rate. All the unattached motors have a rebinding rate of pi n. So what you can do, you can write down the expression for the probability of finding the cargo in different states. For example, p1, p2, p3, p4 up to pn, including p0, and then you write down the master equation, and then you find out the values of this probability by solving the master equation in the steady state. And from those steady state probability, you can calculate all the other average properties. For example, average velocity, the total distance traveled, average number of bound motors, and so on. But the important thing to remember here is that in these models, the assumption of load sharing was uh, uh, the assumption of the load sharing was the one which makes the model mean field. But if you look at this mean field model of load sharing, it had its own problems. For example, there were a few experimental observations which cannot be explained by this mean field model of load sharing. One of them was the step size distribution. The other one was that, let's say, if a cargo is being driven by two motors, then what this model predicts that the velocity with two motors will pull a cargo will be higher than the single motor. But that's not the case. Experimental observations show that in the low load regime, two motors can actually move. Cargo which is being driven by two motors can move slower than a single motor. So what we did, we developed a stochastic model to overcome some of the difficulties of the mean field model. So what we do here in this stochastic model of unidirectional cargo transport, we have a spherical cargo, and we put same types of either kinesin or dynein motors on these cargos, and we model the motors as springs which can buckle without any resistance. And in this model, the motors step, detach, and reattach with probabilities which are obtained from the respective stepping, detachment, and reattachment rates, which can be experimentally measured, at least the stepping rate as well as the detachment rate. So in this model, we obtain the stepping rate from the respective force velocity relation and the detachment rates from the respective force dissociation relation. Now, similar to the unidirectional mean field model of cargo transport, Lipowski's group also developed a model for bidirectional transport. And again, this model was an extension of the unidirectional mean field model. The two main important assumptions of these models were that if there is a presence of opposing motors, then it induces a load force. And whatever this load force which is being presented by these opposing motors, that load force is shared equally by the engaged motors on the other side. And using this model, they were able to explain some of the data of the lipid droplet transport in the Drosophila embryos. Now again, we did so by developing a stochastic model of bidirectional cargo transport, which was again an extension of our unidirectional cargo transport model. So what we did here in this case, we used two different types of motors, kinesin and dynein, working on the same cargo. We used the experimentally determined properties of the kinesin and dynein motors, and then using those properties, experimentally determined properties, and using an experimentally constrained model, we were able to show that these kind of mechanical stochastic tug of war models cannot explain bidirectional transport in lipid droplets for the Drosophila embryos. So this was a general introduction about the mean field models and stochastic models of cargo transport. Now, if you look at the in vivo transport is generally bidirectional. And if you look at many cargos, for example, mitochondria, endosomes, liquid droplets, many of these cargos move bidirectionally, and they use both types of motors, plus and directed motors as well as minus and directed motors. And if you analyze the trajectory of these moving cargos, what you will find that they will run for some time. They can take a short pause, they can again run. Sometimes they can altogether change their direction of travel, this is called a reversal, or while moving they can pause for a longer time and then again they can reverse their direction. So if you look at a typical bidirectional transport, it consists of runs, reversals, where there is a reversal of the direction of transport, as well as pauses. And during pauses, motors are mostly engaged in a tug of war. Now I'm going to tell you two different stories. One of them is that one of them is to answer the question whether it is possible to tune the cargo transport using a biophysical methods, and and I will discuss our work on one of the biophysical methods, which is basically varying the temperature of the system. And this work was done in collaboration with the group of Michael Varsini at University of Utah, along with my PhD student. And what we try to understand using this work, whether it is possible to change the net direction of cargo transport using temperature. Now, we all know that these motor proteins are biological enzymes, and it is very well documented in the enzyme field that if there is a change in temperature, then the activity of the enzyme changes. So one of the things which we are very much interested to understand how the velocity, force production, as well as run length of these motor proteins depend on temperature, and how the net cargo transport direction will depend on the temperature. So to answer these questions, we took a biophysical as well as a computational approach. So what was done by my collaborator, Michael Varsini, that they measured the various biophysical properties of single motors, single kinesin and single cytoplasmic dynein motors using single molecular experiments using optical tweezers. So what they first tried to do, they first tried to measure the velocity of a single kinesin motor as a function of temperature. And what they observed that as you increase the temperature, the velocity of the kinesin motor increases, and it increases with an it increases using a Arrhenius pattern. Okay, which means that if you plot them, if you take the log of the velocity and inverse of the temperature, then what you get is a Arrhenius plot, and this what you see a single slope. So this gray color one is the curve for the kinesin motor. Similarly, when you measure the velocity of the cytoplasmic dynein as a function of temperature, what we see that it doesn't shows a simple Arrhenius nature. What it has is a break at around 15 degrees centigrade. And if you make a Arrhenius plot of its velocity as a function of temperature or inverse of the temperature, what you see is that it has two slopes. It has one slope up to 15 degrees centigrade, and then beyond 15 degrees centigrade, it has another slope. So based on this data, we can infer that kinesin behaves like a simple Arrhenius enzyme. It has just one activation energy. On the other hand, if you look at the cytoplasmic dynein, it does not behave like a simple Arrhenius enzyme, and it has two slopes and two different activation energies. Now, what we also did that we measured the velocity of ratio of the velocity of the dynein motor to the kinesin motor, and what we found that if you are in the higher temperature regime, up to 15 degrees centigrade.
Ambarish, I'm going to step in. We've got a clarification question.
Yeah.
The question is, what is an Arrhenius enzyme?
Arrhenius enzymes are the ones, so basically Arrhenius enzymes are the ones which, if you look at the rate of the reaction, okay, in this case we are looking at the velocity, they normally follow a Arrhenius curve, okay, which is very well known in physical chemistry. So any enzymes which follows the Arrhenius relation is Arrhenius enzyme. All right. So if you look at the ratio of the velocity of kinesin and dynein motor in the higher temperature regime, if you look at the ratio remains roughly constant. That means the velocity of the kinesin and dynein motor do not change significantly. But as you go below 15 degrees centigrade, their velocities start to differ drastically. So what you find that the velocity of the dynein motors decays much more rapidly than the kinesin motor, and that's why you see this part of the curve. On the other hand, if you look at the processivity of these motors, kinesin at higher temperature and lower temperature, you don't see much difference. Similarly, if you look at the force production by kinesin motors as well as cytoplasmic dynein motors remains almost unaffected due to the change of the temperature. So what changes is the velocity, and the velocity changes very dramatically before 50 degrees centigrade and after 50 degrees centigrade. Now we had all of this data, and then we tried to ask following question. Suppose I have a cargo, and let's say the direction of the transport is initially biased towards the negative direction. So for example, let's say I have a cargo which is being driven by one kinesin motor and 4 dynamic motors. Okay, and let's say the direction of transport is initially biased towards the negative direction, and I'm at a higher temperature. Suppose I lower the temperature, can I see a direction of can I see a reversal of the transport? That means the cargo which was originally moving in the negative direction at higher temperature, can it now start to move in the positive direction? Okay, or towards the plus end of the microtubule. Now to answer this, we again took a computational approach, and for doing this, again we used our stochastic model which I introduced, that we have a cargo on which we put the motors. Motors are modeled like springs which buckle without any resistance, and again we put all the properties of motor stepping, detachment and reattachment obtained from experiments, whatever data we have. So we had the knowledge of the kinesis force velocity relation, so that is what we used in our model. We also had the knowledge of the Dani's force velocity relation we used in the model, and these are the in vitro measured force velocity curves for the kinesin and dynein motors. Similarly, we also have measured the force dissociation kinetics of kinesin motors as well as dynein motors. That is something which published in PNAS paper. So we had all of them, and then we had this new data where we had measured the dependence of velocity of kinesin motors on the temperature. So what we did, we fitted our these velocity expressions with the measured values as a function of temperature. So we got these relations for the variation of velocity of kinesin motor as well as dynein motor as a function of temperature. So we put all of these things back into our stochastic model, and I'm going to play a simulation of what we got from the simulations. So this simulation has been done for 4 kinesin as well as for 4 dynein as well as 1 kinesin motor. The reason was following, that if you look at the recruitment of the motors, so motors are generally recruited on the cargoes in such a way that the forces are balanced on both sides. So dynein normally has a force of about 1.25 piconewtons. So we took a 4 dynein, that makes it 5 piconewtons of force, and one single kinesin can exert a stall force of can exert a maximum force of 5 piconewton, and that's why we took 4 dynein and 1 kinesin. And we first performed the simulations at high temperature, and let me play the animation based on the data which we got from the simulation. So if you do this simulation for the higher temperature, what you see that there are 4 dyneins and 1 kinesin, and we started from 0 and look at the direction of the travel. Now what you see, this cargo is moving on the average towards the negative end of the microtubule. Now again, so what we did after this, we changed the temperature in our simulations, and then we performed these simulations at lower temperature at 275. And now I would play this animation. Now what you can see here, that again the cargo is starting from 0, but instead of on the average going to the towards the negative end of the microtubule, it starts moving towards the positive end of the microtubule. So what we can see that initially the cargo which was moving towards the negative end of the microtubule, now it starts moving towards the positive end of the microtubule because of the change of the temperature. And the question was why this was happening. So this is some of the data that we have from the simulation. So what you see here, that at the higher temperature all the trajectories are towards the minus end of the microtubule, whereas at the lower temperature all the trajectories are towards the plus end of the microtubule. So what we found from our simulations, that there was a reversal of net transport direction when the temperature was lowered. And what we also did in our simulation, we artificially increased the processivity of the dynein by a factor of 10, because we know that dynein works with dynactine in vivo, and that increases processivity. And again, we observed this phenomenon of reversal of direction of transport. So what is happening here in our simulations, that when I am at higher temperature, there is one kinesin motor and there are 4 dynein motors, and these 4 dynein motors are strong. So what is happening, that as soon as one of the engaged kinesin motor disengages, these 4 dynein motors are good enough to take this cargo towards the negative direction on average. On other hand, when you are at the lower temperature, what happens that these dynein motors become very weak. Remember that the ratio of the velocities of dynein to kinesin motors decreases as you are towards the lower temperature, and therefore one strong kinesin motor is good enough to drive this cargo towards the positive end of the microtubule. Now what we did next, that we tuned our model for the in vivo stall forces. So we know that typically in vivo stall forces are around 2.5 piconewtons. So we tuned the stall forces for both kinesin and dynein motors. And what we found that as long as you bias your initial direction of transport to the negative direction, you always see a reversal of direction of transport at the lower temperature. So this is the summary of the first part of the talk, that our simulations predict a reversal of net direction of the transport as a function of temperature change, and this reversal in transport direction is observed as long as the cargo was set to favor minus and direct motion at the room temperature. And this reversal of transport direction is robust with respect to motor stall force and proximity, because we changed all of this in our simulations and we did not see disappearance of this phenomenon of reversal of transport direction. Now the second short story which I wish to share is a method which was developed by my collaborators at NISCD. So the work was done in collaboration with Carlos Guardia, and this is my PhD student Aritra Singh, who worked on the simulation part of it. And this is one of the method which is called RAM, reversible association of motor proteins. And using this method, one can change the position of the cargoes inside the cells artificially using a biochemical method. So this is why this method is called RAMP, and the full form of the RAMP is reversible association of motor proteins. Using this biochemical method, you can manipulate the position of different types of cargoes, endosomes, mitochondria, lysosomes, to different positions. And what I mean by different positions, that suppose you want to position the cargoes towards the periphery of the cell, you can position them towards the periphery of the cell. If you want to position them towards the perinuclear region, you can position them towards the perinuclear region. So the method is following. The method of this reversible association of motor protein works in the following way. What you do is basically you co-express organelle protein, a protein which is found on the organelle, which is fused to GFP, green fluorescent protein, as well as a streptavidin binding peptide. Okay, so organelle is fused with the streptavidin binding peptide as well as GFP. So GFP acts like a marker of this organelle position, and then you also make a construct. So for example, in this set of experiments, there were two constructs which were made. One of them was this KIF5B construct, which was a kinesin motor which was directed towards the plus end of the microtubule. Okay, so this was fused with streptavidin, and what we have a streptavidin binding peptide. So when these two come together, they will have a tendency to bind. Similarly, they developed another construct which was KIF1C, which was again fused to streptavidin. So again, this streptavidin can interact with this streptavidin binding peptide, and then this can transport the organelle. So the method is basically co-expressing an organelle protein which is fused to a streptavidin binding peptide and a plus end-directed motor. Similarly, they also had another system where they had fused this organelle protein to another minus end-directed motor, kinesin, which was fused to a streptavidin. And using this streptavidin binding peptide and this streptavidin bound motor construct, you can change the direction of transport either towards the negative end or the positive end. So what can be done in these experiments, that suppose you have this motor construct. Okay, if you use this motor construct, then if there is no biotin, then this motor construct, what it will do, it will drive all the carbonyls towards the cell periphery. And the moment you add a biotin, now biotin is something which interacts very strongly with the streptavidin. So what it does, if you add the biotin, it will disturb this binding, okay, between this motor and this tetrabridine, and all the motors, all the cargoes will come back to their normal position. Similarly, if you have this construct, in this case, if you use this construct, then all the organelles will be coming to the perinuclear region, and the moment you add the biotin, what will happen? The binding between these two will be disrupted, and all the cargoes will come back to their normal position. So what you can do, you can change the position of the cargoes either to the peripheral region or to the perinuclear region by simply adding or removing the biotin. So you can actually manipulate the position of the cargoes using this method, which we call RAM. And this method works because this biotin competes with the streptobridine and this streptobridine and streptobridine binding peptide interaction. So when you are adding the biotin, it is disrupting either this interaction, or it is disrupting this interaction. And by disrupting this interaction, you can change the position of the cargoes in whichever way you want, whether you want to place them in the peripheral region or in the perinuclear region. And this organelle positioning in the ramp is again driven by the opposite polarity motors, which undergo a tug of war during the cargo transport. And as I said, that this method can be used for different types of organelles. And using this method, you can study the properties of different types of cargoes in different cellular location. You can locate them wherever you want to study them, and then you can study them. Now, these are the two movies from the experiments. In the first one, they have used a positive end directed motor, which was fused to streptobridine. And when I play this movie, what you will see is following: that everything was, please notice that everything was initially to the was towards the perinuclear, was towards the peripheral region, and when the biotin was added, then after a period of about 30 minutes, everything came back to the normal distribution. On the other hand, if you look at this movie, everything in the beginning is towards the perinuclear region near the nucleus, and when you add the biotin, everything goes to the normal distribution. And these are the snapshots of this. So in this case, what was done? There was a lysosome associated membrane protein 1, which was fused to the streptobridine binding protein and GFP, and that was interacting with this M-cherry fused to KIF5B, which was a positive end directed motor along with the streptobridine. In the other case, again, we had this lysosome associated membrane protein 1, which was fused to streptobridine binding protein and GFP, and the motor was a negative end directed motor fused to M-cherry and streptobridine. Now, what we want, and this is the data from the experiment. So when you just have this lysosome associated membrane protein, streptobridine and GFP, you are not adding biotin. In that case, what you see a normal distribution of the cargoes. Okay, and when you are adding the biotin, what you see that all the cargoes which were initially in this construct, when you are using this construct KIF5B, all the cargoes were initially in the near the peripheral region, and when you are adding the biotin, after a gap of about 5 minutes, all of them come back to their normal distribution. Similarly, if you are using this construct, then again everything was was accumulated near the perinuclear region, and after some time everything comes back to the normal distribution. And what we wanted to understand was the trend of this organelle positioning and how it is changing over time when the cargoes are either being released from the peripheral region or from the perinuclear region. So this is what we tried to model using the computational modeling. And to model this, we use the bidirectional cargo transport model, which was given by Lipowski's group. Now, the way we model this, we model the cell as a hemisphere of radius 16 micron and nucleus to be a hemisphere of 6 micron. We model the microtubules as lines joining the nucleus to the periphery. And Then the initial radial position of the cargoes was assumed to be centrally clustered or peripherally accumulated or normal steady state distribution, depending on which experiment we are trying to model. And when we start our simulations in our model, the cargo moved radially along the microtubules, whose runs, pauses, reverses, and detachments were simulated using bidirectional cargo transport, which was given by Lepos's group. Okay, and to model this, we have to use the properties of the endogenous kinesin 1 motors, kinesin 3 motors, as well as dynein motors, which are present in the system. Okay, so what we are actually modeling is this: there is a cargo, and then there are two types of kinesin motors which are endogenously present. One of them is kinesin 1, the other one is kinesin 3. They move towards the positive direction of the microtubule. Then we have a dynein motor, and these are the two constructs which were made, which can be so basically, when we are trying to have the peripheral accumulation of the cargoes, what is happening that the cargo is interacting with this KIF 5B and it is driving the cargo towards the positive end. And when we want to model the perinuclear accumulation of cargoes, we are basically activating this interaction between cargo and KIF 1C. However, to model the uh, the the steady state distribution of the cargo positions in our simulation, we only need to have the properties of kinesin 1, kinesin 3 and dynein motors, because initially what we are doing in our simulations, we are artificially positioning all the cargoes either at the peripheral region or at the perinuclear region, and then we are trying to see how the cargo positions are changing with time. So what we did using this model of Lipowski's group of bidirectional transport, we simulated the cargo positions with time, and we were able to reproduce the experimental data of this cargo positions with time in our simulations. However, there was one problem that, if you look at the experimental data in the experiments, the movement of the cargoes was starting after some time. However, in our simulations, all the cargoes start to move they start to go to their normal distribution right from the beginning. Either you are using the simulations where you are releasing the cargoes from the periphery, or you are using the simulations where you are releasing the cargoes from the perinuclear region. In both of them, the cargoes start to move right from the beginning. So this discrepancy between the in vivo experiment and in silico experiments could be explained by the contribution of the biotin uptake and streptavidin binding peptide and streptavidin dissociation rate, because it takes some time for this reaction to happen. And this is why in the experiments it takes some time before cargo starts to move. And your simulations, since this doesn't require any time, after we release, there is nothing to stop them, and therefore this starts to move immediately. So we were able to reproduce this experimental data now, and these are some of the snapshots of simulations. So this is the simulation where the cargoes are initially located at the peripheral region, although you see some of the cargoes which are in between. But remember that our system is a hemispherical system and we are looking at a projection. But in fact, in our simulations, all of these cargoes are at the periphery, and when you release them after some time, they come back to their normal distribution, and this is what we quantified here. Similarly, in the experiments where we tried to understand the redistribution of the cargoes, when all the cargoes were perinuclearly distributed in the beginning, again you take all of these cargoes which are near the perinuclear region, you release them, and then after a time of about 30 minutes, you see that they have come back to the normal distribution, and again this is the quantification of the same thing. So we were able to reproduce the experimental data. However, there was a problem that our collaborators also designed two knockouts. Okay, these were double knockouts. So as I told you that in this system, what we have is two endogenously present kinesin motors, kinesin 1 and kinesin 3, and then one dynein motor. And these were the constructs which were co-expressed. Now here what was observed, that if you do a knockdown of the endogenously present kinesin 1 and kinesin 3, all the cargoes come back to their normal position quickly. Okay, so when these two kinesin motors are present, in that case they come back to their normal distribution in about 30 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, your time's basically up.
Yeah,
So if you wanted to
just
summarize quickly,
just
we could
one second,
give.
yeah.
Okay.
I will take just one more minute. So what was observed, that when you have this system, then all the cargoes were coming back to their normal distribution in about 30 minutes. But when you do a double knockout of kinesin 1 and kinesin 3, what you see that they come back to their original position very quickly in about 15 to 20 minutes. And this was something which we again tried to do artificially in our simulation. So what we did, we again did a knockout of kinesin 1 and kinesin 3 in our simulations. And what we found was very surprising, that if we knock out the kinesin 1 and kinesin 3 in our simulations artificially, what we see that all the cargoes come back to their normal distribution very quickly within a minute. This was something which was very surprising for us. And therefore, in order to reproduce this kind of pattern, that cargoes come back to their normal distribution in about 15 to 20 minutes, we had to artificially introduce the pauses in our simulations. So when we introduce pauses in our simulations artificially, we were able to see the accumulation of the cargoes to, or the redistribution of the cargoes to their normal distribution in about 15 minutes. But we had to introduce the pauses artificially. So what these simulations tell us, that in addition to these kinesin 1 and kinesin 3 being present, there are also some other motors which are present, and our collaborators have to look for these additional motors which are present there in the system. And this is a modeling of the same thing, and we were able to see normal distribution of everything in about 15 minutes after doing a double knockout of the kinesin 1 and kinesin 3 with pauses. So all the work of the temperature dependence was done by Engineer, and all the work on this RAMP experiments, computational modeling of the RAMP experiment was done by Arithro. And my collaborator for RAMP experiments was Guan at NISCD, and my collaborator for this temperature dependent activity of proteins was Michael Gorslin at University of Utah. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. We have a few minutes for questions.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I had a question regarding the first part of your talk, where the first work that you had described, when you were showing towards the end of it, when you were showing this reversal of travel direction with temperature.
Yes.
So my question was, suppose if you had changed these 4 dynein and 1 kinesin, these numbers, okay, then how will it change? Will the temperature at which the directionality reverses, will that be dependent on these numbers?
Okay, that's a very good question, and actually we tried to investigate that, but I don't have those plots here. But what I will show you is this one. Okay, so again, this is what you have been asking. So
yes,
we did change the number of motors which are engaged in both directions. Okay, what you see that the amount of reversal. Okay, you see that if you look at the transition temperature almost remains unaffected, but the amount of reversal that you see, okay, the gap, you see the gap, this here, right?
Yes.
This is the probability
yes.
of reversal. So dip in the probability of reversal increases if you have more difference in the number of motors.
Okay, so you mean the transition is sharper and sharper
Yes.
as I am skewing the ratio. Okay,
right.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
I was wondering, so if I understand properly, in your first part, you were using an explicit model where you describe all the motor positions, and in the second part, a mean field model. I guess in the second part, it's because you have many of them and you need a very
That's right.
efficient simulation. But
Yeah,
so
just to make our simulations easier, because there are a lot of cargos, and we wanted to do it quickly without much wasting the. We were not having that much computational power to do the simulation of each of the cargos using stochastic model. That's right.
Okay, sorry, I have a very bad connection for the sound, but I guess I got your answer.
So what I'm saying, I would repeat that. What I'm saying that yes, we used the mean field model given by Lipowski's group in our modeling of ramp experiments to reduce the computational cost.
And I was wondering
if model is still stochastic model.
I was wondering if you did some check for on a single track with a specific configuration to compare what gives the mean field and the explicit, because we had the experience that sometimes it can be quite different. And
yes, that's a good thing. And if you do a comparison of predictions from the mean field model and stochastic model, yes, you will see some differences, and that is something we have done in past. So there is a difference of about 15 to 20% in some cases in terms of if you look at the average velocity.
Okay. Anyhow, thank you. It's a very nice talk and very nice results. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. So, like you have shown, so there are different type of cargos to be transported. So, is it possible to model these in your first part of talk, like the nature of the cargo you have assumed to be spherical?
Yes.
Is it possible to model it?
You can do it for any type of cargo. You can, if you are using a mean field model, okay, then what you're doing is essentially you are basically assuming somehow that all the motors, the cargo geometry doesn't matter. Okay, it can be also a tubular cargo, but yes, you can do these simulations for any other type of cargo. For example, you can take a tubular cargo like a microtubule, and you can do the simulations using this stochastic model.
Okay.
Was that the question?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we have published one of those works in one of the PhysGuy paper.
Okay, well, let's thank Ambarish again.